We are the Guinea Pig Collective. All will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
Searching for old treasures, blowing off the dust. Timeless stories and legendary characters. This is Talking Movies. Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another Talking Movies. So on today's Talking Movies, we will be talking about the Mel Brooks written and directed 1981 History of the World Part 1, starring Mel Brooks as Moses Comicus Torquemada, Jacques, King Louis XVI, Dom DeLuise as Emperor Nero, Madeline Kahn as Empress Nympho, Harvey Korman as Count de Monet, CLORIS LEACHMAN as Madame Defarge, Ron Carey as Swiftus, Gregory HINES as Josephus, Pamela Stephenson as Mademoiselle Rimbaud, SHECKY GREENE as Marcus Vindicus, Sid Caesar as the Chief Caveman, Mary Margaret Humes as Miriam, and Orson Welles as the narrator. And of course, as always, a whole host of other cast, crew, and members that actually comprised and made up the rest of this film. From the dawn of man to the distant future, mankind's evolution, or lack thereof, is traced. Often ridiculous and never serious, we learn the truth behind the Roman emperor. We learn what really happened at the Last Supper, the circumstances that surround the French Revolution, and how to test eunuchs, and what kind of shoes the Spanish Inquisitor wore. This film opened up on June 12, 1981, and grossed a respectable $31.6 million at the box office. And of course, it left countless people wanting a sequel. But Brooks himself has claimed that History of the World's budget, an estimated $11 million, exceeded that of his previous 3 films combined. Particularly expensive was the Inquisition scene, in which the set alone cost $1 million. Now, by comparison, the entire budget of 1968's The Producers was only $941,000. And Mel Brooks wanted these scenes to be narrated by somebody with a commanding voice. The unforgettable baritone belonging to Orson Welles was what he chose to have. Brooks hired him to narrate the 5 major sections that make up this film. Now, beforehand, it was agreed that the cinnamon legend would receive $5,000 per day in exchange for his services. Now, figuring that he'd have to spend 5 8-hour days recording and re-recording those lines with Welles, Brooks paid him $25,000 up front. But by noon on the first day, Welles had recorded every single one of his lines to perfection.
Jesus!
What?
Yes.
What?
You said what?
What?
Not.
Oh my God, I could have paid you $5,000 is what Brooks wound up saying. And after kicking himself a few times, the funny man asked Welles how he planned to spend the bounty. Welles replied, Cuban cigars and Sevruga caviar. And taking it back for Mel Brooks, in 1949, the late great Sid Caesar hired Brooks as a joke writer for the Admiral Broadway Review, a short-lived NBC variety show. Now, after the series ended, Brooks joined the staff of Caesar's next program, Your Show of Shows. Working for a living legend was something the younger man would never forget. And even today, when Brooks is asked about his mentor, he often says, no Caesar, no Mel Brooks. 22 years after Your Show of Shows ended, Brooks expressed his gratitude to Caesar by giving him a major role in 1976's silent movie. Brooks would cast the comic again in History of the World, this time as the Chief Caveman, who had a zeal for music and slapstick. Now, even though this movie is titled Part 1, believe it or not, there was never any intention to make a second movie. On June 7th, 1981, just 4 days before the movie opened at theaters, the director weighed in on this subject in the New York Times. Will there be a History of the World Part 2, he asked rhetorically. No, maybe a Part 4, but never a Part 2. This misleading title, as he later put it, was meant as a joke, one he now regrets, because he says, "I'm sorry I did that. The kids kept writing me letters asking when are we going to see Part 2. He explained while promoting his DVD box set, The Incredible Mel Brooks, an irresistible collection of unhinged comedy. But even with that aside, Mel Brooks had thought about topics that he might spoof on in a potential follow-up, and he states, "There's a lot of things I haven't covered in history, things like the Civil War." As far as some of the segments in the movie that Brooks may have had doubts about, one of them actually was the Inquisition piece that he did.
For now begins the Inquisition!
Now, in general, Brooks' films aren't exactly noted for their political correctness. After all, the director's very first film was about an Adolf Hitler musical. Still, even he wondered if the breakout song in History of the World had finally crossed the line.
The Inquisition, what a show. We know you're wishing that we'd go away.
Brooks told Mademoiselle, "I don't know how audiences are going to react to the Spanish Inquisition sequence." As he put it, trying to get a laugh out of any scene that involved Jews on racks could be very dangerous in the end. History wound up repeating itself. After The Producers was released, Jewish leaders contacted Brooks en masse with complaints about the film's brazen Nazi gags. Thanks to that big Inquisition number, History of the World Part 1 garnered a similar reaction. "I got a lot of write-ins from rabbis," Brooks wound up saying. And to all those who had written him, Brooks replied, "I'm just mentioning the Inquisition so people don't forget," echoing his defense of both The Producers and Blazing Saddles. He went on to argue that satire could be an effective weapon against bigotry. Brooks would go on to say, "Comedy brings religious persecutors, dictators, and tyrants to their knees faster than any other medium." And originally, Josephus was going to be played by Richard Pryor. Now, Josephus is a quick-witted Ethiopian slave and is a principal character in the film's Roman Empire segment. Now, Richard Pryor seemed perfect for the role, and to Brooks' delight, he accepted the role. Now, unfortunately, a terrible accident kept him out of the movie because on June 9th of 1980, less than a month after the History of the World began production, the comic lit himself ablaze while freebasing cocaine and had to be hospitalized. Now, at the suggestion of Madeline Kahn, Brooks handed the role to tap dancer Gregory HINES. And according to Brooks, the Moses scene was actually a last-minute addition. In a 2012 interview with the Directors Guild of America, Brooks would go on to say, "Sometimes you will get very lucky and the set will give you ideas for jokes." Now, one day he was gazing out at the scenery that had been built for the caveman segments in History of the World when the gears in his head started turning. He immediately thought, well, where do I go from here? Originally heading into the shoot, his plan was to skip the Bible and go straight to Rome. But eventually he realized that the Stone Age set might enable him to explore another chapter in world history. So with a few minor alterations, Brooks converted his fall caves into a mountaintop and the Moses bit was created.
Lord Jehovah has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
And quite honestly, I'm so glad that he included that bit because it was one of the most hysterical pieces in the movie. There is nothing more funny than watching Moses come up with 10 commandments. During the scene with the Vestal Virgins who took the oath of chastity in Caesar's palace in the Roman Empire segment, it is kind of funny to note that all were Playboy playmates. And at the beginning of the French Revolution segment, the street sign reads Rue de Mede, which is French for shit street. Now, in the Old Testament segment, the writing on the tablets are the correct 2-word Hebrew version of the commandments. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, etc., etc. The 5 more don'ts on the 3rd tablet that Moses accidentally drops are don't impregnate, don't laugh, don't buy, and the last one, don't break. The letters of the 4th commandment on that tablet make the sounds of TLRT. But that's not a word in Hebrew. And during the Jews in Space sequence, the camera moves through the center of the Star of David-shaped spaceships, and some Hebrew letters are visible on the interior wall, just under the guns. The words these letters spell out is kosher, because Mel Brooks really knows how to take it a cut above the rest. Now, in the Roman scene, when the court spokesman is whispering, "Remember, thou art mortal," that apparently actually really happened. When a Roman general entered Rome after a successful campaign, he had a servant riding in his carriage with him, whispering that in his ear. And proving yet once again that Mel Brooks is so generous with the people that he employs, the person responsible for all the matte paintings, Albert Whitlock, was drafted to appear in front of the camera. He is the gentleman with the prominent English accent selling used chariots. When Josephus says he is from Ethiopia, he is asked what part. He says 125th Street. That is a famous street that is considered the main street of Harlem. And once again, Mel Brooks likes to borrow from actual history, in a sense. So during the Roman Empire segment, Oedipus can be seen begging for money and wearing dark sunglasses as an indicator of being blind. When Josephus passes him, he slaps Oedipus's hand and says, "Hey, motherfucker." Oedipus was a mythical Greek king who was told in a prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother. When the prophecy finally came true, Oedipus gouged out his eyes with his mother's hairpins. And in an interview with Gene Siskel, Mel Brooks revealed that he filmed a brief scene that made light of the notorious 3 Mile Island incident. I had a father and a mother made up to look like half a dog and half a cat as a result of a nuclear meltdown, Brooks had told him. When test audiences reacted poorly, this bit was removed. However, at least one journalist managed to see an extended cut which contained the footage. The movie's title is actually a play on History of the World, Volume 1 by Sir Walter Raleigh. The History of the World was a book about the ancient history of Greece and Rome, written by Sir Walter Raleigh while prisoner in the Tower of London. He had only managed to complete his first volume before being beheaded. While in the Bloody Tower, he wrote the History of the World, which was first printed in 1614. It was composed of 5 volumes, but only reached as far as the Second Macedonian War in 130 BC. This movie was actually the theatrical film debut of Gregory Hines and Mary Margaret Humes. So the movie's closing credits were designed like the opening credits of another 20th Century Fox production of a Star Wars movie, of which at the time this movie was made, there had only been 2, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, 1977, and Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, in 1980. But of course, as we all know, when these movies first came out, Star Wars was not called A New Hope, it was just called Star Wars. Anyway, I digress, moving on. So the credits directly followed the Jews in Space segment, which is said to have anticipated Mel Brooks' later Star Wars spoof Spaceballs in 1987. And an easily overlooked one is the ship to Judea bears the name of the Israeli airline El Al on its sails. And believe it or not, the French palace in the French Revolution segment was not French, but actually English. The facility used to double for the gigantic French Maison Chalet was historic Blenheim Palace in Oxford, England. Authorization to film there came from as billed in the closing credits with the permission of England's Duke of Marlborough. And Mel Brooks, always being a bit of the jokester, well, during that French Revolution segment, the palace guards that meet Count de Monet's carriage can be seen armed with child's cap rifles. Now, these toy rifles, popular at the time with local attractions like Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm, use small paper rolls with dots of gunpowder embedded in them to make a shooting sound. And right before Caledonia dances in front of the eunuchs, Marcus Vindicus says, "Caledonia, let's make their big head so hard." That's a take on lyrics from Louis Jordan's R&B song Caledonia from 1945, which goes, "Caledonia, what makes your big head so hard?" And of all the segments in this movie, the Roman Empire segment is the longest, running at 49 minutes. And during the Roman segment, near the beginning of the Roman sequence, there is a V and X store. That would be the Roman equivalent of the 5 and dime store. And as with many of his movies, Mel Brooks alludes to his Jewish heritage and lampoons anti-Semitism by making light of it. One such scene occurs when the Vikings remove their helmets during the Viking funeral, but their horns remain. This was in reference to the preposterous, libelous, and anti-Semitic myth that Jews had horns. And when Brooks finds something funny, he tends to reuse it. Such is the case with Harvey Korman as Count de Monet. He hits his teeth on a statue while trying to kiss a woman, just like Hedley Lamarr, Harvey Korman, does in Blazing Saddles in 1974. And as always, there's always a few cameos that really just go unnoticed or unmentioned. Two of which I'm going to mention right now. B. Arthur, uncredited as a dole office employment clerk in the Roman Empire segment, and Hugh Hefner as an entrepreneur in the Roman Empire segment, revealing his new concept, the centerfold. And as always, now we will talk about a few of the goofs in this movie. So in this segment about the Roman Empire, Nero is the emperor, which would set the story during the years 54 to 68 AD. However, when arriving in Judea, Jesus is talking about his Last Supper and his betrayal, which happened before the year 3031 AD. In one scene, the Roman soldiers arrive to present Caesar with the spoils of war. A fanfare sounds. However, when the shot cuts to the soldiers entering, the heralds, which are the trumpeters, are just starting to bring their horns up to play. After Leonardo da Vinci arrives at the Last Supper, he holds up his right thumb. Then it cuts to a wider shot and he's holding up his left thumb. An easily overlooked one is when the nuns line up at the side of the pool. There are only 12 of them. But then you see 16 of them swimming in formation. And in Caesar's palace, during the feast, wine is spilled on Caesar's toga, but the stain disappears in subsequent shots. And also when Caesar hands the medallion to his aide and says, "Wash this," the aide is seen holding the medallion, but when the camera angle changes, he doesn't have it anymore. And in the Old Testament segment, Moses is about to tell everyone of the 15 commandments when he drops one of the stone tablets and it shatters. The only problem with this is stone cannot really shatter like that. So when Comicus Miriam Swiftus and Josephus are escaping in the cart, the shots from behind the cart show the tire tracks from the vehicle the camera is mounted on. And lastly, during the Stone Age segment, when Orson Welles narrates about the caveman discovering humor, A caveman unsuccessfully tries to humor the others with his comic routine before being snatched away by a dinosaur. As the dinosaur snatches a caveman comedian away, you can actually see the cables used to hoist him up.
Judas!
Jesus.
Yes.
What?
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 Yes.
Jesus.
Yes.
And keep him up.
Oh, Your Majesty.
How's it going, Marie?
It's good to be the king.
And submit to the king. Last one.
It's good to be the king. It's good to be the king.
Just spoil me. Humiliate me. Only do it. Do it. Hump, hump, hump.
It's good to be the king.
Test the guillotine. Holy
Jesus.
Yes.
What part? On 25th Street.
Then nothing should arise.
Get it?
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 He's a eunuch.
Caldonia! Caldonia! Let's make thy big head so hard. Caldonia! Let's make thy big head so hard.
He is a eunuch.
Caldonia! Let's make thy big head so hard.
He's dead.
Caldonia! Let's make thy big head so hard. Thy big head so hard. Hard.
The jig is up!
Quick time, hard!
I love quick time hard.
And keep him up. You son of a bitch, you bastard!
Anyway, guys, I would like to thank you all for being here. I always appreciate everybody that stops by, and I am so grateful that you decide to spend time here with me watching this. Anyway, guys, have you seen this movie? Do you remember this movie? And if you haven't, why not? Get out there and watch it. This is an incredibly funny movie. You gotta see this at least once. If you like anything like Blazing Saddles or Spaceballs or any of the other type of comedy movies that Mel Brooks has done, you will completely enjoy this one, I guarantee it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And as always, my friends, if you've enjoyed what you've seen and what you heard, go ahead and destroy that like button for me. And if you are new to the channel, welcome. I am glad that you're here. I hope that you've enjoyed yourself. Go ahead and take a look at some of my other content. And if you enjoy what you see and what you hear, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And I will catch you all next time. Later, y'all.